Okay, welcome back. My name is Anthony Frausto-Robledo. I am co-chair of BAC Talks, a member of the Alumni Advisory Council, a licensed architect with Mellows and Palladino, and the founder and publisher of Architosh.com, one of the world's premier online publications focused on digital technologies in the AEC industry, currently in its 25th year. Our panel session is titled Future Digital Technologies in Architecture, AI, Immersive, and BIM 2.0. We are, at this present time, at a critical juncture in the coevolution of the AEC field in computing innovation. AI, immersive computing, and BIM 2.0 technologies are all starting to converge. We are going to explore this as it relates to the field of architecture and AEC broadly. But first, some introductions. And just a word first. Actually, stay muted during the entire presentation and put your questions in the Q&A panel below as opposed to the chat panel. Okay, our panel. We have an incredible lineup of speakers with us, and I'm honored to introduce them to you. Jason Arndt is a licensed architect, software developer, and owner of Zephyr Architects, local source, and CA documents. He is also an adjunct professor at Boston Architectural College, teaching thesis design studios since 2014, and most recently, Alter Ego, an AI-focused design workshop. Jason received his Master of Architecture from Columbia University in the city of New York and his honors Bachelor of Science in Architecture from the University of Texas in Arlington. He is a winner of ENR 20 Under 40 Award, that's Engineering News Record. Dr. Mahesh Daas serves as the 8th president of the BAC, guiding the institution toward innovative frontiers. He has authored or co-authored 3 influential books, among them Leading with Aesthetics, the Transformational Leadership of President Charles M. Vest at MIT, and Towards a Robotics Architecture. His latest co-authored book, I, Nobot, is a graphic novella fully illustrated using AI and explores humanity, architecture, and cities in the age of AI and robots through philosophy, fiction, and poetry. He is the first person of Indian origin to be elevated as an ACSA Distinguished Professor, the highest national recognition for an architectural educator. Dr. Daas has also served twice as president of the Association of Computer-Aided Design and Architecture, Arcadia, which recognized him in 2013 with the Arcadia Society Award of Excellence. He currently serves on the International Editorial Board of Construction Robotics Journal. For over 30 years, Randy Deutsch, FAIA, has been an architect and educator, and in recent years, an author, international keynote speaker, workshop leader and administrator, mentor, and AI researcher. He is clinical associate professor, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign School of Architecture. In the last decade, Randy has authored 6 books, including Convergence, The Redesign of Design, and Super Users, Design Technology Specialist in the Future of Practice, a Best Future of Technology book of all time recipient. Nirva Farashian is a principal and chief information officer at CBT Architects, a Boston-based award-winning design firm providing services nationally and internationally in architecture, interior design, and urban design. She has an interdisciplinary background in architecture, construction, and technology, leading and managing technology solutions to creative design environments, technology adoption, and change management. And finally, my co-moderator and good friend, Evan Troxel. Evan's work is at the intersection of architecture, technology, and human interaction. A licensed architect with over 20 years of experience, he has primarily focused on public projects. Evan is also a seasoned podcaster in the AEC industry. He co-hosts the ArchiSpeak podcast, which has been running now for 12 years, hosts the TRXL podcast, which explores the coevolution of the AEC industry and technology, and co-hosts the Confluent podcast, which provides an inside look at software development for the AEC industry. Okay, just a quick word. We're going to tackle these converging themes in reverse order to our title, so we can spend a little bit more time on AI. We may move a little quickly through BIM 2.0 and Immersive. Evan, BIM 2.0. Evan, good morning. And Evan comes from us from Oregon right now, so thank you, Evan, for getting up so early for this event.
Got my coffee.
Yes, excellent. Evan, BIM 2.0 is something you and I have spoken about before many times, and I think you have interviewed most of the companies on the right side of our current slide. I've talked to many of as well. How would you like to head into the territory of BIM 2.0 right now? There's a lot of different angles to tackle.
Well, I think it makes sense to go in the reverse order that you just talked about because architects do tend to have a bit of a shiny object syndrome. So we'll save the shiny object for last because I know it's exciting. I think one of the big issues that we've seen with BIM is up to its true potential. And I think that that lives on both sides of the coin. That lives on the architect side. There's never enough time. I think everybody who has an architectural education understands the concept of working on projects and spending time on them, and you could always design more and do more. And BIM really requires more. And we've seen the complexity of projects get higher and higher over time because we can put more and more data and information into those, which definitely has its benefits. But architects are also incentivized to spend less time on things, and so shortcuts are taken. And so quality of BIM never really reaches its true potential. And I think students see this, and I think professionals see this as well. And so, to your point about the companies on the right of the slide here, and the minds behind those companies, they've seen the holes that are left in BIM for various reasons, and they are going after that. And I think that we're feeling that boom. At least I'm very aware of it in my position as a podcaster and as a practicing architect, because they're trying to solve real problems that have fleshed out over the last 20 plus years of BIM. And so BIM 2.0 feels like a fresh injection into what everybody kind of does on their daily day-to-day architectural job, but really doesn't enjoy doing. And so these companies, I think, are tackling that because in the last 20 plus years, smartphones, apps, things that are actually joyful to use that people like needs to work its way back into the software that we use to deliver our projects on the architectural and engineering side, right? So I think that's just kind of a quick overview of the state of the industry, not realizing the potential of BIM on the software side and on the practitioner side. And BIM 2.0 is really trying to get in there and grab a foothold because it's a huge market, and solve some of the real problems of day-to-day use. And what more could we actually do with it? So these software companies are doing just that.
Right, right. Randy, you wrote a book about BIM many years ago. What is your take on this inflection point in the evolution of BIM?
Well, thanks, Anthony. And thank you, Evan. I'd like to build on what Evan just said, but first I'd like to say I'm thrilled to be here with my academic and professional colleagues. And I'm thrilled to see so many in the audience, a lot of familiar names. Thrilled that you're here with us today. Yeah, I've given a lot of my time over the last decade focused on technology and the work processes in our very human attributes as well. And trying to look at where all of this is headed without trying to get distracted too much by the shiny objects. In the epilogue of my 2017 book, Convergence, I talk about this idea of the software of everything. And what a number of us in the field would love to have one tool that just sort of does it all. We've only started to tap, for example, in building information modeling, maybe 20% of what's capable of. We tend to use it for very basic things, whether it's drafting or modeling, and there's a great deal more that it can do. BIM 2.0, I think, is completely going in the right direction. I think the way I'd like to frame this real quick response to the question is that we have a number of tasks that need to get done when you work as a design professional, structural engineer, or an architect. And a number of the tools are capable of addressing these individual tasks. We have a larger requirement or responsibility as design professionals that has to do with going from not knowing to knowing. This is something I discussed in the Convergence book. where we redefine everything we do in terms of having a number of questions at the beginning, and we use the tool to come to a place of knowing. Another way of looking at that, which I diagram in the book again, is this idea of where things are ambiguous and uncertain at the beginning. And as design professionals, what we're trying to do is arrive at a place of certainty. So the BIM 2.0 tools don't primarily do this holistically. They do identify gaps, as Evan had pointed out, and they run with those. And they're fantastic from that point of view. Another way I'd like to frame it real quickly is with the arrival of AI, we have a very low bar to entry. Almost anybody can mess with it. You don't have to be a design professional, of course, to mess with these tools. They're very intuitive. And there is a general democratization going on, which is very welcome from a multidisciplinary standpoint and diversity standpoint. And all of that is fantastic. So the BIM 2.0 tools have recognized this. HiPAR is coming out very soon, for example, with a very a very low bar to entry, intuitive tool that everybody can use. You don't need to go through any training. You can just pick it up and run with it. I mean, bless the heart of Graphisoft's ArchiCAD. I remember 30 years ago picking it up and using it. But generally, BIM 1.0 was very difficult to learn. It had a large entry price that you had to pay in terms of the learning curve. So AI, I think, is making everything much more intuitive and easygoing, which is great. The downside, if you think of it this way, for BIM 2.0, is when you reframe what we're trying to achieve, going from not knowing to knowing, AI actually does that readily well. And in a lot of cases, AI is going to answer much more quickly and professionally and in ways that really serve us. Do that for us where we don't even need a model. So there is a scenario where we actually go back to CAD or go back, it sounds blasphemous to say this, but we go back to 2D and leverage AI to answer all the questions we need to answer. This is a question mark that we have right now in the profession industry.
That's fascinating. Nirva, I know that your firm has ventured into using many of these tools. I think TestFit is one of them.
Yeah, I think we've, with the exception of Augmenta, which I think it's mostly electrical engineering tool, we have tested all of them. But I think the fundamental difference between the left and the right is that the left was pretty much doing similar things. So if you had Revit, you weren't using Vectorworks or you weren't using ArchiCAD. So on the right, it's really a very different pool of tools that have come into play, and each one fits at a different phase of our overall process. And with the exception of the few that they're trying to take over the entire process, you still need something from the left. So even the ones that are aspiring to kind of dethrone the left, they still in a transitional period trying to collaborate and interoperate with something that we're using from the left side. It is really important to see, though, that there's two phenomenal differences that I see. One is, and a very important one, is that the landscape of people and technologists and just the framework of technology specifically in an A firm, design firm, has phenomenally changed since 20 years, where we were applying these tools on the left side. We have every firm almost has new roles and a very different approach for technology. What was behind the scenes, back-end technologists now have been front-end. So there is the people and skill set and general framework and the mindset that has changed. There's a lot more to change, but we've made a lot of progress. So people who are implementing those things or or management that's making decisions is a very different group of people than it was on the BIM 1.0 side. The other thing I can see I see a very different approach on the right side, because these tools now are preaching enhanced collaboration, data sharing capabilities, interoperability between all the tools. They come with a sense of, well, we're going to work with whatever else tools you have. Before, if you used one, you couldn't communicate with the other one. There is definitely greater emphasis on analytics and integration with definitely AI, machine learning, IoT. We want to enable more optimization, automation throughout the whole cycle: design, documentation, construction, and the tools on the right side are heading towards that. We have greater emphasis on sustainability, life cycle analysis, and there's a limited number of tools you have. There's much more that kind of fit with the rest of the framework. So it's not just modeling, advanced visualization, simulation capabilities. So we go more into immersive and interactive design. So definitely automation, but it's still relying on something from 1.0. We have, for example, test fit as giving a good example. It's just a tool for one early phase.
Next slide.
Yeah, early phase tool for just doing feasibility study. So it takes a small piece of our overall life cycle. So there are similarities and overlaps in the tool, and it is challenging to manage and figure out how to enhance our workflow. So they're coming into play, working with our existing products, with our Rhino workflows, with our Revit workflows, and it's just really an exciting time for our industry, an exciting time to be a student, an exciting time to be a professional.
Excellent. It seems like that I'm hearing a couple of different trends, Evan, and chime in for a second if you want. I'm hearing one trend about specialization. These tools are doing very specific things, and they are doing them better than maybe some of the bigger tools because they're tackling maybe it's analytics, for example,
Yep.
or generative design. And then I think what Randy said is that there's also where AI will plug into all of this. And I think many of these tools were actually already well on their way before the kind of AI boom hit us last year. But now I think they're embracing AI and they're looking at how the tools like ChatGPT and these things, if we can plug into these large language models to enhance the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, TestFit, SpaceMaker, which is the precedent of Forma, Upcodes, they existed before the ChatGPT and AI explosion in 2017, 2018. We were clients of all of this, and no one was saying AI. But now, everybody's an AI company, and everybody's doing, and there is a real confusion, even that, like, what is the difference between the AI side or the basic automation stuff that many of the firms were starting to do many years ago, Dynamo, Grasshopper, and all of the automation tools that we currently have, trying to enhance our documentation and optimization processes. And I completely agree what Evan said, that because of one is time that we'd never have, and the other one is some really technology challenges. Some of our models are huge and things don't work out very well when you populate that much data. Some technology advancements have solved those. The cloud has solved those. But I feel, not to steal the AI thunder, is that those redundant things that we don't want to do, and standards that we put that not very many people follow, not because they don't want to follow, but because they don't have the time element. Sometimes things are modeled and there's no time to go fix it. It's not correct, but there's just no time. So I am hoping that AI brings in and solves one of those challenges and automates things. And on a simple level, we currently run all kinds of automations at night. Things that we have discovered, cleaning things, printing, batch printing, a lot of things that happens overnight on our systems. And I think in the next few years, that automation for documentation is going to be a real game changer.
Interesting. Interesting. Jason, I'd love to hear your insight a little bit on this too. We're doing good on time. We have a few minutes. Do you have anything to share about sort of where the BIM 2.0 story is going?
So from my perspective, one of the things that I find it fairly interesting and something that we're talking about in our office, and we're actually encountering it on a pretty regular basis. And Randy was talking about the accessibility of these software and the learning curve being fairly shallow compared to the BIM 1.0 elements is architects and what we need to how we need to engage with this process and the representation of this process, because sometimes there's a short circuit even outside the profession. And the idea that if this becomes so accessible that it's not an architectural process all the time, or if it's just the client skips us for a little for this, say, this test fit, and then they're coming up to us and they're talking to it in an educated way, because the knowledge that's kind of been embedded in the software moves it forward. And so that's something that actually we're seeing on a pretty regular basis now, whenever with some more sophisticated people. And so the question that I don't necessarily know the answer, but it's something that we're exploring, we're talking about, is what do we continue to bring to the table as architects? I mean, obviously, we think that we're fairly well educated and we have a broad understanding of things, and we certainly do compared to say clients that aren't trained. But it's that opportunity to make sure that we present those differences and we continue to talk about it as this kind of becomes more and more accessible over time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to, I think the question about, what is it that makes us valuable as architects? I think that's something I'd like to loop back on when we get into the AI section a little bit, Jason, and maybe I'd be curious to know what some of your students, or what you talk to your students about in that domain. I think we're going to move ahead now to Immersive. Ayla, the next slide, please. So I think everyone's seen this picture. It's world famous. It's the Apple Vision Pro. And experts believe that this device is an inflection point in computing, ushering in the era of spatial computing. So in thinking about all this, Evan, I know you and I have talked about this as well. It's not a VR headset. It's something more than that, right?
Right. Yeah, the idea that I think is maybe a little bit lost in marketing right now is that this is a viewer of whatever you want to view, whether that's a TV show or a movie or whatever. The idea now, I think, is really about having an actual computing device that's a wearable on your face in this case, right? So that I think is really going to change the game, and I think there's a lot of potential here for architects. And yeah, right now the cost of these devices is very high compared to the other headsets on the market, but Apple is very explicit. Don't call this a headset. They don't class as the existing devices that are out there. This really is a for computing spatially. And for architects, I think we understand that better than just about anybody, right? And so there really is a lot of potential here with this class of devices, and it's going to be really interesting to see where things go, especially as all of these things that we're talking about today, these topics converge, because these aren't, while they are seemingly happening in parallel, they're really not. This is kind of like there's these things and they just keep coming out one after the other, and it's like, oh wow, now this thing combined with that thing creates an entirely new recipe to think about. And I know Nerva has implemented VR in the office for, I mean, it's great for designers, but it's also great for clients to understand design. So there's like a design aspect in just understanding what we're doing in-house, But then there's this communication layer to it that allows normal people, right, to understand things way before it becomes a reality. And that's a big deal. Like, that's a really big deal. Clients don't understand drawings, right? We've lived that. They understand renderings a little bit better, but renderings are always cherry picked, right? The angle is just right, and the mood is just right, and the lighting is just right, and all of those things. VR isn't photoreal, and everybody forgives that. Like, they don't care. Once you get into VR, it's like, this is fantastic because it's the one-to-one scale, and they can look wherever they want and they can experience it. And so really, to me, this is a bridge to experience, and that method of communication has huge implications potentially for us.
Yeah, I think Nerva, I've spent some time at at CVT's new offices in the media room there, and they're a lot of fun. Ayla, next slide, please. And you've told me that your media room has actually enhanced business in the sense that clients who have experience working this way, you think that it's contributed to some momentum with future work or continual work. Can you talk a little bit about the impact of immersive technologies? You have a green screen in your room. You can put people that are in the room, in the scene. There's actually, the next slide will do that. Ayla will stay on this slide for a second. But briefly talk about sort of these technologies at CVT, if you don't mind. Thanks.
Sure. I think, visualization and how to communicate with clients has been generally our industry problem. And the opportunity came upon when we did move in the middle of COVID and to a new space. And the first challenge was really moving from completely remote to what the hybrid conditions were going to really be kind of an unknown. So we used the space as an experimental, and we're still using it as an experimental process. And so different rooms, different displays, very different thought processes than our previous office. I mean, all of this immersive and VR experience, we had started it in our old office, but we just did not have enough space, and deconstructing and reconstructing all of that took a lot of time. So the space presented, the new office presented tremendous opportunities, and it still is. So one of the things we have is a media room that is currently shown, and it has gotten a lot of traction from our clients, from our employees, and it has been one of our, generally all of our office displays has been a reason for employees to come to our office. We thought about providing different experiences in our office versus coming just sitting and being through Zoom and Teams meetings, just to have to come to the office because you could do something there that you cannot sitting at home. And it's similar for clients instead of just having meetings like that. So the media room provides large scale projections and immersive experiences and better client communication. A lot of the meetings happen there, or portion of the meetings happen there. Clients specifically come to visualize. We have gaming controllers. They can walk through the models, go whatever direction they want to visualize and better understand, and certainly better decision making. We have the green screen where I think the next slide has Anthony in the model, in one of our models. So where you physically can be
Next slide, Ayla.
exploring that. And we also have we also have VR and AR stations. We have almost all of the headsets, and that with the exception of the Apple Pro, the Vision Pro, it's really a challenge sometimes to put that kind of claustrophobic headsets on our clients' heads. And but it certainly is a new age coming through with the Vision Pro, and we really are excited on providing that as another immersive experience. And lastly, we are exploring the intersection of physical and digital, and we are still very much, despite all the digital advancements we've made, we are still very much physical model builders, and we have a super model shop. And so we have been experimenting with combining both. And we have multiple displays with touch screens that have a digital screen underlaid on physical models. And that has also been extremely receptive by clients to really explain different alternatives on quickly flipping through and using physical models and digital models to explain our ideas. And some of our clients have taken those into their marketing centers or those ideas and other types of mostly really marketing their either apartment buildings or offices, providing different choices, quickly flipping through and picking different units to change the floor plans. So it's been really exciting to have these immersive and interactive displays all over the office, moving screens on wheels. Again, a lot of it is improving, we are a highly collaborative industry, and the face-to-face meetings are still a value proposition, and bringing in and coming in for those kinds of meetings and interacting with all technologies has been really very receptive, and also very interesting working together as an entire office with our designers and the technologists, and combining ideas and moving forward. We're trying to kind of redo the room now. We've had 2 years experience, and from learning all of that, we're trying, for example, to add sometimes people say they're going to come to the meetings and just end up connecting remotely. So we're trying to bring in that, improve our media room to have the remote experience fully engaged as if you were there.
Interesting. I love the idea of how the architectural office is transforming itself, becoming an immersive space. And I wonder how that might change the architecture school. And I think it's very interesting in these times when hybrid work is so prevalent and seems to be very beneficial. There's pluses and minuses to it. And one of the minuses is that people maybe don't want to go in the office so much. But the office becomes sort of this adult version of a kind of children's museum for grown-up architects. They can kind of touch things and play with things and be very interactive. And I think that's very exciting. So I don't know, interesting thoughts there, Evan.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that hearing that we're interested in evolving our office space to be that draw, that thing that draws people to it so that they can have an experience, it lends itself perfectly to architecture. That's what architecture is all about, right? And including people in the design process and giving them, living through the times that we've lived through, there were milestones on projects where renderings were done. And that's the only time renderings were done because renderings were very expensive. Now renderings are free, basically, right? And they happen throughout the design process. The rendering tools now are even tools that help us make decisions along the design process. And so including clients, including people who don't speak our language into that process is really valuable for them, of course, to get that experience, but also for us to get that immediate personal feedback that is only conveyed through body language. Like that doesn't work over email, right? That doesn't work when you send a rendering on Dropbox to somebody. You don't get that reaction, that initial reaction. And that, I think, getting back to the idea of communicating the value of architects and architecture, there's a really special moment that can happen with these. So it's great to hear that firms are taking advantage of that. And I think it's a lesson to students when you do have to build projects for people or design projects for real people, real clients, and lead them through this process and build consensus and get boards to approve budgets. And like, this is how you do it. You actually involve them in that process. You don't just throw something over the wall and hope it lands well. you foster that. And it is a process that you also have to learn on top of delivering your projects really well. And I think the people who do that are going to have a huge advantage.
Yeah, excellent. Well said. I think this is a good segue then into our AI section, and we're right on time. As we head into this part, I will tell you, Dr. Mahesh has been very patient. He's going to help us end this segment with some deeper thoughts about AI, but I think we want to go to Jason's studio work at the BAC, and Jason, you're using AI in both practice and at school in this wonderful new course, Alter Ego. And we had a little conversation about that when we first connected about this panel. I'd love for you to describe sort of the reason for the name of the studio and what this is about.
Sure. So about a year and a half ago now, when generative AI stuff kind of hit full speed, and Midjourney and all these other generative AI softwares drop, we started using it in the office, and there was a very quick realization in the office and me that there's a potential for some embracing of a new way of thinking with architecture, and maybe even a new way of learning. So the class Alter Ego focuses basically on the concept that if we can outsource something that architects do a lot of, which is production, we produce stuff, and then focus on something else basically instead of this production. So maybe being experts or communicating or being a technician or analyzing culture or environments or sustainability. How can we move forward and utilize this technology to actually grow as a profession? So this is basically a class that I wanted to introduce and kind of talk about that. And obviously, one of the other things that we've all kind of experienced through architecture school is that the design studio, I mean, I think most of us, the design studio is a dominant part of our education. We're talking 40, 50, 60, 100 hours dedicated to that. And a good chunk of that was just production. And we also had a tendency to measure the architect, especially in school, on our ability to design. And so if you are a great designer, you're the pinnacle of architects, right? So that's what you were. And so I think, there's this opportunity, I mean, with AI, and I'm seeing that these kind of the ability to create and represent ideas that are compelling really quick. Moves us away from saying, okay, design is necessarily the pinnacle of architecture. Maybe there's other things that can be really important, hence the alter ego situation. So that's kind of the premise that the class is set on, and we're experiencing that in real time at the office. Also, we've changed the dynamic of how we actually operate on a daily basis because of some of these softwares that are coming out for generative imaging.
Right. Next slide, Ayla. I think it's interesting, this concept of the alter ego and the new skills that may be more required in this age of AI. This slide, you say, let's talk about communication, right?
Yep.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I think, and this is something that we're exploring, I think as architects, we explore this every day and we attempt to communicate. We just talked about with this VER, communication is one of the most important things that we can do. And, as things get automated, I think one of the things that's going to maintain its integrity for a very long time is the kind of human interaction, the ability to communicate with somebody. And so this was a student, Marisol, she did a great job. Looking at the idea of communication, where she took this opportunity to leverage the software and the amount of time that she had, and she went out there and she interviewed people, she talked to people, she spent a lot of time trying to understand what they needed, what they liked, what they wanted, and then she created these spaces based on that communication, and it was almost a real-time interaction going on with these people, but that was basically the premise of let's get better at talking. Let's not spend so much time producing. Let's talk more.
Right, have more communication.
Yeah.
And then next slide, Ayla. And then, of course, with the prolific aspect of AI and its ability to create, It buys the architects much more time to do, which could be applied to many other things. But there's another problem that gets created, which is if you have 1,000 different renderings generated automatically or generative design solutions, someone needs to curate that and decide which is the thing that they want to move forward with.
Yeah, I mean, I think being a good curator, this is one of the things that I think is probably going to be one of the most important skill base, I think, going forward. And this is my opinion. I'm seeing it in the office. You know, is there is computational aesthetics, so there's a possibility, you know, the AI and the computers can start to identify what is good, what is bad to a certain degree, outside of just a collective data set. So you have a collection of certain data, and it says, oh, this collectively is good. Maybe not, but it also maybe can change or be able to analyze that itself through psychological aesthetics or cultural aesthetics, all these other things. But at the moment, it's very important for and this is something I think about how to talk about that, how to train that, how to be at the forefront of it whenever you're asked to curate what's appropriate for a certain situation versus what's not appropriate for a certain situation. Is this good? Is this bad? Is there opportunities here? Is there, can something be changed? And I think that's a very skill set that we go through in the education process as an architect and as professionals. But we're now presented with the idea of we can do it a lot faster. One of my favorite examples I like to use, and I don't know if it's a one-to-one, is how many times does a doctor have to draw a cell, to identify the membranes, to identify the nuclei, all these things that are important to understand, to understand that building before and stop drawing that cell in like a day-to-day process, and use that knowledge to actually move stuff forward. So that's the curation, and how do we become good curators, and what does it require to be a good curator?
Interesting. Evan, what are your thoughts?
I'm reminded of a story that Rick Rubin tells about himself, and he probably doesn't need an introduction, but world famous music production. He's done various artists that have sold probably millions and millions and millions of albums, and all of those artists kind of go back and like Rick Rubin was magic. And Rick Rubin says, I don't know anything about music production. I don't know how to engineer it. I don't know how to write music. I don't know how to make songs. He just has great taste, and he facilitates the creative process with the musicians to make that happen. And so what Jason's talking about, I think it's really interesting, and it's very human also, right? Is this idea of curation and this idea of taste. And again, that is what separates a lot of architecture, capital A architecture, from buildings as well, right? It's the experience that people have, and knowing as an architect what kinds of experiences and what makes for great experiences that people really want to have, that's our special thing, right? And so it is interesting to kind of shift it from the making of those things to the curation, or you're basically coaching the software to do things, but you're also really working with people to really draw out the nuances of life and get that into design so that those things can actually be built.
Interesting. Randy, I think we wanted to turn the AI question around a little bit here on practice and what AI can do in terms of accelerating the workflows, but what impacts that might have on the business model.
Sure. Thanks, Anthony. I'd like to actually just dwell just for a second here before I do a deep dive into that question. In this idea of what Jason's talking about with communication, I'm absolutely supportive of that. In super users, I talk about the soft skills, attitudes, mindsets that we all need to help each other, help work with these tools, help our clients. And to the extent that we can focus on these very human capabilities, the better off we will be moving forward. We'll improve AI, AI will augment us, and it looks like a very bright future. As Nerva was saying a few moments ago, being very optimistic and positive about where things are going. to the extent that we invest in ourselves, the better off we will be in terms of our very human skills. That said, touching on this idea, this question, which maybe you'll get to eventually, but what is it that makes us valuable as architects, or how do we distinguish ourselves from AI, or where are the weak spots in AI that we can help with in the years ahead? A couple that come to mind. One is AI is exceptional at answering the question, what's actual, what's necessary, and what's desirable. Curator says what's desirable as well with the question of taste. But where it's really weak is answering the question, what's possible? So I see ourselves as continuing to be the ones to identify what the possibilities are, what is possible in the situation. Second of all, AI is really strong in analysis. It's great at summarizing, with some hallucination, of course, and bias baked in. But that said, it's incredibly weak at synthesis. We don't have courses in architecture programs. As a full-time academic in a couple of programs, I have not seen courses where they focus on this idea of synthesis. It's just something that we naturally do through having iterative design process and so on. To the extent that we are the ones that bring everything together, maybe in part, that's what Jason's getting at with Curator, synthesis is a really important thing. The other one is orchestrator, right? You've got the feedback from AI, whether it is the word to image tools, Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, whether it's the large language models, we're going to get information back, and we're going to get mostly there, but we're the ones who need to orchestrate this. We need to orchestrate teams. We're very much the human glue. And I think these are capabilities that are going to take us further. Lastly, since we have the slide up and has the word curator on it, I've been in the public record to say that curator is part of what we do. But even more importantly, when you look at yourself as a designer or junior designer or emerging professional who's a designer in a firm, and you rise within your organization, within the firm, you're no longer designing everything in the firm. That would be bad behavior. It's actually physically impossible to do. You become a design editor, and you're editing the designs in a way where everybody gets to be involved. And it's a much more democratic way of looking at it versus one person in the office, let's say, being the tastemaker. Lastly, to hit on this idea of the business model, or firms need to rethink the business model, how AI is going to help. I'd just like to use one real quick example, because I really love this. In the March 15th issue of Architect magazine, I use that with quotes because it's completely online, there's an article called The Future of HKS. HKS Architects, depending on the list you look at, is the top 10 or top 15 firm in the world. The first half of the article, so they're celebrating the 85th anniversary of their organization, and the president and the CEO are discussing the future of their firm as they get into 90 or 100 years and looking forward. They split the two roles into strategy and vision on the one hand, and what they call implementation in the financial picture on the other. And what I found to be really fascinating, first of all, the article, the first half is not worth reading. I mean, it's almost impossible to get through. It's just a bunch of marketing talk. You get to the second half, and it is absolutely one of the greatest statements I've seen. It's almost like the gun going off at the beginning of a race, where they say that on the implementation side of their major practice, things are going to be automated, and be automated very soon, like we've been discussing so far. So machine learning, quote unquote, and AI are going to help us put together buildings in a different, more efficient way. It's already happening. And then where they go, thank you, Cynthia, for putting the link in the chat. So where we're going to go from this, HKS says, moving forward, we're going to move from being a commoditized firm to being an ideas firm. And while there is a lot of talk like that in the past in generalizations, they're being incredibly specific about reorganizing. It doesn't mean they're 100% giving up architecture. They're reinventing themselves in terms of strategy, in terms of vision, in terms of providing these ideas, identifying possibilities, instead of churning out buildings and so on. So I think from a business standpoint, it's not, I mean, I think it is safe to say that AI is going to have a major impact. And it's not just in terms of speeding things up or making projects be somewhat less expensive because we sped things up, but it's also going to be because it's going to free us up as design professionals. Some of us will use that for mental health or work-life integration or work-life balance reasons. And some of us will pour more time into going after more work or improving the work we currently have from a quality standpoint. And some of us will be freed up to imagine what the future can be. And so discussions like we're having today in the BAC talks, we can have within our organizations and try to identify what we want to do moving forward.
Excellent. That's all very fascinating. Nerva, I think I kind of skipped you. Can we go to the next slide, please, Ayla? But I know I wanted to, I wanted to give you a chance to talk about this slide that you submitted with this tool here on automation. Nerva, can you go to the next slide? I'm sorry. And the next one. There, thank you.
The last two, yeah. So
yes, thank you.
I think the last discussions with Evan and really, Evan and Randy really describe or attempt to start addressing what we were saying about the value proposition of what we bring in. And I think the biggest part we can do in our offices is have a continuous conversation to understand what is the value proposition. And it's the first time that it's not about a tool. You know, we keep talking about tools, but it's about ideas of what we are trying to do and how best the rest of the tools fit us. Because generally there's a trend that the tools are going to determine a solution for our problems. Somebody out there has figured out that there's gaps or holes, and then so they are doing that. And I think it's an excellent opportunity for firms to rethink everything that we do and how we do. And unlike the other times we've implemented BIM technologies and things, this is not a confined thing just for production or image generation, or it's just a business-wide decision to talk about it and educate internally and have extreme communication so we can effectively use things properly. And I am just extremely excited that it's not they're not going to replace us really, because after all, this is a very human and a very collaborative industry and a process, at least for the time being. So moving back, and I think in terms of discussing directly tools situation, and I think we are in somewhat an assist mode and an experimentation mode, and we all need to do that in order to have these higher level conversations. And really the most interesting part is the image generation and all the slew of tools. And we are using Mid-Journey and all of that, including some of the direct architectural or design industry design ones like Veris, that's Evolve Labs has it. But I am also very interested in downstream and in the 2.0, the gains in the downstream process, and the 2.0 tools were there really automating. One of them is Glyph, really automating our documentation processes. And hopefully, I'm hoping that the time needed that is spent in really rethinking our business model. Yes, probably everybody's mental health needs it first, but if this is allowing time, we never have that. When we try to collect people to talk about strategy, to talk about next phase of doing something, to talk about real decision making, we have just lots of people spread into deadlines and not enough time to do any of those. So I hope that allows time to rethink everything we're doing and figure out what is the value proposition. And I think things have remarkably changed that now it's a direct we not only use the tool, but we have direct communications with the venture capital funding people who are funding the tool. We have direct communications with the developers who are developing the tool. We have direct feedbacks. And then as a design firm, a lot of I think it's a responsibility that we have to offer our feedback. We have to engage with these early startups, not just for just using the tool in our ecosystem, but really contributing to the ecosystem. And a lot of our time is in using these tools, I must say, is not direct benefit and impact yet on our workflows, but just seeing that our contributions are developing their tools to better help everybody. And this, we are at a turning point in our industry where we need extreme collaboration, working with all parties, working all together. And I know that's starting, and it really looks hopeful for a lot of things. As it does just not make sense for one firm alone or two firm alone. This is no more a choice of picking one product or the other. It's a choice of really moving our entire industry together.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm delighted to also hear in all of this that we're seeing the human be such an important part of the field of architecture. So AI is not going to replace us, we hope. And it sounds like what we have in front of us is the fundamental fact that architecture is at its root a human act, rooted in complex social dynamics. Mahesh, you've been patient. You have written two very interesting books. The last two, I mean, on AI. One is on AI, your novella, but the other book is on robotics. And the thing about my takeaway from your reading your book is that while it's mostly about robotics, AI is intrinsic to robotics. And so, you know, a software robot is just AI, and AI is a robot in another form. Talk to us a little bit about your robotics books, AI, and also your vision behind iKnowBot.
Anthony, thank you. And first of all, thank you for putting this together. A great conversation I've been thoroughly enjoying, and to see the audience engagement also tells me this is such a potent, relevant, and important topic that we've been talking about. And to Alumni Advisory Council for organizing such an exciting symposium. Happy to chime in. And first, I think I'm going to make some connections, if I may. And you may close the screen share. I'm going to just talk. Yeah, thank you. So the first thing is, let me make some connections with BIM, Immersive, and then AI. And then I'm going to take it to a different level, perhaps broaden the scope and zoom out a little bit and try to see what is the meaning and significance of this. Where are things headed in the longer term? I think that's what I will eventually talk about. First thing is BIM. I'm just kind of remembering when I was a beta tester for Revit. That was in early 2000s, and I was a beta tester also for CATIA in late 1990s. And that was a time they were called parametric design and parametric architecture, parametric models. And the language has shifted from that to building information modeling, where it is essentially information that has interrelationships, and things then recognize themselves as walls and windows and doors, and they know how to behave in a model. And then we have now a paradigm shift again with AI. Autodesk in particular is investing heavily in AI, and they just kind of, I was talking to their EVP not too long ago, and they're infusing AI into everything. And so BIM, immersive environments, design, production, construction robotics, all of those are being transformed with intelligence being infused into them, artificial intelligence infused into them. There are a number of startups, as in the chat, I see the discussion, number of startups And often these are by people, experts who are not trained in design or architecture. They are engineers, computer scientists, and others. And these startups are transforming, and there is heavy investment going into it. Nearly $2.1 billion of venture fund is going into AI and construction technology space. So we will see a lot of transformation, right, from all of this. So in the short term, it's been now about 2 years since generative AI broke out into the public arena. Obviously, AI has been a topic for a very long time in computer science in a limited way. And I think prior to generative AI, we had such things as GANs, which are basically generative and antagonistic neural nets, which are limited in what they do and how they function. But I think with the transformational models, like in Midjourney and Stable Diffusion and the new breed of AI technologies, we are seeing something of a revolution because it is engaging the public. It is now accessible to everybody. And unlike any other technology in the human history, we are seeing the adoption of these technologies at a very brisk pace. They scaled up to 100 million and above in no time at all. So that is revolutionary. We can look at very short term and say, today, in order to get a project out of the door, what do I need to do? What competitive advantage do I have? What quote tools do I need to integrate into my workflow? How is that going to make me better in what I do? That, I think, is one part of the discussion, an important part of the discussion for the firms and organizations to stay alive and competitive right now, and maybe in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But I can tell you that AI, generative AI, is still in its infancy. We cannot and should not make assumptions about its limitations based on such a short window. What we can look at is the trajectory of where things are headed. So there is $100 billion, and we're talking about billions, investment going into the next generation of Gen AI. Today, there was a scientific article from Amazon AI, well, they're working on their own AI. And then just a few weeks ago, another article from Microsoft's scientists on AI, who made the point that they're noticing the emergence of mild consciousness in generative AI. That they are surprised by emergent properties in intelligence, artificial intelligence. What it means is, consciousness that we so think is human and, biological life is no longer the property of the natural evolution and human or biological intelligence. So when you look at trajectories like that and trends like that, we have to be aware that we are only at the threshold of something very revolutionary and transformational that can be very unsettling. Frankly, that is anxiety-provoking for anybody. And when we cannot look beyond 5 years and say the world is going to be the same as it is today. And when you look at who is actually leading this transformation in Gen AI, we are not at the table per se right now in shaping these technologies and having these conversations. And so when, me and my co-author, Andrew John Witt, we wrote these books towards robotic architecture and I Know Bot, our idea is to really shape this discourse and the conversation about, what is it to be human in the age of AI and robotics. And because we have to redefine ourselves as in relationship to these powerful phenomena. I call them phenomena. I don't call them technologies. I don't call them tools. I call them phenomena because they're transforming our experience about how we see the world, how we understand the world, and what new things it reveals about the universe and ourselves. and then what new agency that it provides to humanity, and then how the prospect of they might outlive humanity and human civilization. Why? Because these are technologies we are making in the image of being human. They have the human alignment, that they are all tuned for human alignment. They talk to us, they understand us, they respond to us, they look like us. It is all about being human, right? So I think we have to pay attention to that, because it is probably not too distant in the future. And one of the stories in I Know About is called Architecture Without Architects. It's obviously a pun on the book, Bernard Rudolph's famous book, Architecture Without Architects. But it acquires new significance in the context of Gen AI. And that is that what we do currently is probably going to be outdated and transformed in a fairly 5 to 10 year horizon. Our roles will change, and what is the value proposition we bring will change. So the question then arises, what is our value as humans and perhaps as designers? And that is a question we have to continue to ask ourselves. There are going to be minute shifts that will occur. It's like the boiling frog in a boiling water syndrome, where before we realize, the entire game is going to change, right? So we have to be prepared for that. So here is what I will offer a couple of things to perhaps frame it and wrap it up. Gen AI, as we know right now, when we say AI, what do we imagine? Do we imagine a kind of an artificial human being? Do we imagine a machine? Do we imagine some abstract cloud of some kind? Do we imagine a computer? We don't know what to imagine when we say Gen AI. That is because it has no body. It is not embodied intelligence. It is disembodied intelligence, and that's an important aspect of it. What it means is we are embodied intelligence. Humans or life forms are embodied intelligence. Throughout the human history, in fact, the history of the Earth, there has never been intelligence outside of a body. I'll pause there because we need to understand the significance of it. There has never been intelligence that lived outside a biological body. It is the first time. We turn the tap and intelligence flows out. You touch a device, there is intelligence in it that is human-like. In some ways, it is superhuman-like. Already, 2 years into the public debut of these technologies, it is already human-like. And so we don't know what transformations will happen in the future. But along with not being embodied comes a risk, which is they have no point of view. These large language models or image models, diffusion models, they all do not have the concept of self or a body or a viewpoint, because with the body comes a viewpoint. I'm able to see things, sense things, hear things, and I'm in a community of people. And therefore, there is a certain interest in self and defining a community. AI does not have it at the moment, until perhaps it is embodied in a robot. And marrying, as you said, Anthony, marrying AI and robotics is where there is that scope of an embodied intelligence that is far more powerful, far more capable, and is instantaneously connected universally. We are not. But I think our value proposition is we have a viewpoint, we have empathy, we can imagine and empathize and connect in ways that Gen AI is not able to at the moment. Perhaps that will change. Once again, it is all caveats of timeframes. We don't know what will happen beyond that. So those are some observations about what we can think of when we think of Gen AI. We should not be too wrapped up in the shiny objects at the moment, just because they're generating beautiful fascinating imagery right now. There are actually softwares being developed and or AIs being developed that will transform the whole, design process, where with just a click or a text, it might be able to generate complete models of buildings and give a number of options instantaneously, right? So that is where things are headed with various startups that are working on it. So our business models and the fields of architecture and design industries in general are going to be challenged. And yes, absolutely, we all will be well advised to pay attention and be at the table of shaping these technologies, offering the discourse, and framing things. So I'll conclude with a framework called SMAR, SMAR, which comes from education discipline. And whenever there is a new technology that comes onto the scene, they may substitute, they may modify, they may augment, or they may redefine what we do. So substitution, modification, augmentation, and redefinition. And redefinition is where things are headed. Right now, we are trying to substitute where we say, I used to do it that way, I'm going to do it this way with AI. And there may be augmented where I say, now I'm empowered a little more to visualize it differently or design differently. I can analyze it differently. And modification is, now I have to change my workflow. Redefinition is, my entire business model has changed. My value proposition has changed. And therefore, the revenue streams of where this goes are also going to be changed. So I think in education, in practice, and in general, the world, we are at the threshold of something absolutely revolutionary. And so I'm so glad that we are having this conversation at this time and actually elevated beyond what happens just today, maybe next year, to a broader horizon.
Excellent. Well, thank you. That was a wonderful summary of so many different points and the emphasis on human qualities of our field. There are some questions, and we have a little bit of time, so why don't I jump right into one of them? This one is to Randy, and it had to do with synthesis, your use of the word synthesis. Could you talk a little bit on the definition, your definition of synthesis, and how you currently teach this, or how we should teach synthesis in architecture?
Absolutely. So I hate to, respond with an example, but let me just go through a real quick anecdote, very quick. In the 1960s and 70s, we had the opposite of AI, which is participatory design. It's where we work with communities. Architects would meet with 30, 40, 50 members of the community, wanted a new community center or addition to their community center, a new church. And they would listen to each and every person. Everybody would take out some cardboard and they'd put together a little model, they'll do some sketches, and they would hand it to the architect. The architect would go away for 2 or 3 weeks and come back. And everything I've ever seen that's come back, I've seen the reaction of the community that the architect was working for, where they said, wow, you incorporated my idea. This is fantastic. But all 30, 40, 50 people said that. Everybody felt like they were heard and included. That is synthesis. And that is what we do naturally day in, day out. So the second part of the question, which is how do you incorporate that into the architecture curriculum in school? There are a number of ways of doing it. We do it naturally, just where we're natural design thinkers as we go through projects in Design Studio. I've been teaching Studio for 22 years. And I would say the best way to do it is not just to have midterm and final reviews and then, take the images and put it in your portfolio. But after you get the feedback at the end of the semester, to continue and respond to the feedback that you got and take your project further. And that's how you build the synthesizing muscles. So there is no endpoint. And as you do that again and again and again, and you continue to zoom in and zoom out, using that superpower that we all have and seeing the big picture, but then also the minutia, you start to realize that when something is being said, You can think about it very specifically, how it affects the project, but then you start thinking in terms of the larger context and how the building fits in with its community and so on. So those are just a couple quick ways of responding to the question, but I think it's an excellent one. Thank you for asking it.
Okay. There's a couple of others I want to get to. Let's see, one of them was, let's see here. Those who select the sources that the large language models and other AI models have as influences, they clearly influence the results. I think that's the question there. They're asking that if that's the case, and I think that is the case. Anyone want to elaborate on that? This is about AI bias, I think.
Yeah, I can elaborate a little bit on that, and we've talked about this a little bit in class. And I think the first part is to acknowledge that right now there is a bias, and to understand that that is, I think someone mentioned one of the things that we have to be not suspicious but critical of with AI, and approach that with great thought. And to a certain degree, it would be really great as we go forward to start to understand exactly where that's come from, because it makes it a little bit easier to understand that bias and react to it. And I think that would be hopefully one of the, and I know a number of companies have started to address this. Some of them are addressing it in a heavy-handed way, as in they just kind of not allowing you to kind of delve into certain aspects because of the innate bias. But it would be great to start to have interdisciplinary conversations with sociologists, psychologists, architects, all these people, to identify these things and be able to put them in words, and to teach and identify what these are, so we can move forward in a measured way, as opposed to kind of drift with the river, as it were, back and forth. Very complicated issue, but I think once again, the identification of it is certainly, and the acknowledgement that that's there is very important.
I think that it's very important to start. I mean, we're all learning it. The first thing is to check the data sets that the system is relying on, really, not just only for the bias, but the outcomes are very different depending on what kind of data sets it's real and where. And, some of them are now producing, sometimes you see the Getty photography things on the outcomes, things that really are not allowed to be used. So I think it's part of this learning process as we're experimenting to figure out some of the guidelines of how we're going to try to think about this thing, and where are the data sets, and and how we're tapping, and where we're saving, and it's a whole new world. It's not just get the tool and use it. It's we're as a firm now, we don't have any kind of roadblocks, but I think as we start learning it, so that we have a very slim policy, so to speak. It's our intellectual property is also at stake, so there's a lot to look at and a lot to set up. And I think that as we all getting educated by this, users, firms, everybody, people who are putting the data sets out there, it's just a new norm of trying to figure out process.
Excellent.
Also, if I could just chime in just real quickly, sorry.
Yes.
Just for everybody who's participating right now in this talk, listening in, this week a book came out by Ethan Malik, and it's called Co-Intelligence. And if you don't have the time or the resources to download the book and read it, there's a great 1-hour podcast with Ezra Klein this week with Ethan Malik. And I recommend it mainly because he has a beginner's mind in the way he approaches AI, and he tests everything. And his approach is much like an artist. And there are certain times when you want a grease crayon, and there's certain times you want a piece of charcoal. And there's other times as you go in the studio, you start going, deeper and deeper into more detail, that you want to sharpen your pencil, or you want to use a marker that's pointed. And that's the approach he takes to AI, which is great. So he says essentially that Claude has a certain personality, as does GPT-4, which is he and Sam Altman are predicting by the end of the year we'll have GPT-5. And this goes for, all the tools that are available to us. Each one has a different bias. Each one has different baked in guardrails based on its history. I think we're all saying the same thing here. But just like an artist would learn to use certain tools, and I think this responds to one of the questions or comments in the chat that was just made as well, you don't really get burnout from the different tools any more than an artist has different tools in their toolbox if you just treat it as another lens through which to tackle a problem or to answer a question that you may have. Yes, they can be costly, as as tools are for artists as well. But at the same time, treat it, it's, again, they're just there to help us. If you think of it from that standpoint, it's easier not to get burned out by the tools that are available to us.
Thank you for adding that.
Anthony, if I may just also add to what Randy has just mentioned is, particularly in making our book, I Know Bot, we generated something approximately to the tune of 15,000 images using GenAI, right? So the idea there was to experiment, really extensively experiment. And there were a number of formative stages where, for instance, I experimented with what is AI's understanding of materiality. Does it understand what a brick is? Does it understand titanium? Does it understand plywood, acrylic, all of this, right? And to my amazement, and I've actually been posting those up on social media for the last 2 years, is it does. It understands materiality. And it generates things based on the nature of the material. And they're very different, right? So experimentation, I think the idea is engagement and experimentation are very important to understand, first of all, what it is, because we do not yet completely understand what it is. And we can't assume we know already what it is, because it is so vast, so multidimensional, these models, large language models or diffusion models, that we have to constantly be pushing to see what they're capable of, how do we work with them, how do we engage them, and all that. Otherwise, we would be blissfully ignorant about the various possibilities. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks for adding that. And everyone, thank you so much, Jason, Mahesh, Randy, Nirva, and Evan. We are out of time. I'm sure we'd love to talk about all this, but we must go now. So, and thank you, the audience, for tuning into this session.
And thank you, Anthony and Evan. Thank you.
You're welcome.
you.
Thank you.